in Syria is an appalling, horrific, unjustified and unjustifiable crime. This massacre was condemned by my government in the strongest terms possible. And here my government's version of the condemnation has joined exactly the wording adopted right a few minutes ago by the Security Council. I would like here to condemn also, on behalf of my government, the tsunami of lies that were said a few minutes ago by some members of the Council who tried to mislead you by saying that their way of leveling accusations against my government is based on what they said, evidences. They are wrong and they are misleading you. Neither General Mood nor anybody else told the Security Council in the informal session that he would blame the Syrian government's forces for what happened. It's really pitiful and regrettable that some members of the Council came out just a few minutes after General Mood had finished his briefing to mislead you, to tell you lies about what happened. I invite you all to look at what happened in al-Houla in its entirety, in the comprehensiveness of the picture. What happened in al-Houla yesterday has a background, and we should understand this background in order to catch and understand who perpetrated this crime. Yesterday, after the Friday prayer, 200 to 300 armed men gathered around 2 o'clock p.m. They gathered in several points actually, and then they moved and they met in one point in al-Houla. They had pickup cars loaded with heavy weapons such as anti-tank missiles, mortars, and machine guns, the Libyan way you saw a couple months ago. And they started attacking the law enforcement forces in the area, who were positioned in 5 different points. And at the same time, the military operations, these attacks, military attacks, lasted from 2 o'clock p.m. up to 11 o'clock in the evening. So here we are not talking about a military attack that took place and ended in a matter of half an hour. It's a full-fledged military operation planned in advance with multitasked purposes. After attacking the military forces, the law enforcement orders positions, they turned towards the civilians. And then they moved to another village, which is very next to the al-Houla, 1 kilometer away, where they burned the national hospital. They burnt the crops of the farmers, and they burnt houses. And they killed also dozens of innocent civilians in another village, also next to al-Houla, called Shumariya. So here we are not talking only about one incident that took place in one precise area. We are talking about a theater of operation that engulfed many small villages in the area. My government has established a national commission of inquiry tasked with the mission of finding out who are the perpetrators of this horrific massacre, so that they will be brought to justice. Whoever committed these crimes will be held accountable by the Syrian authorities, by the Syrian government's law in the country. The press statement adopted by the Security Council today adopted somehow the version of events submitted by General Mood. If you go to the language in which the press statement was written, you would find in it that nothing indicates that the Council is blaming the Syrian government forces for the killings and the perpetration of the massacres. On the contrary, it identifies that other elements in the picture may be responsible for what happened. Sorry. I am saying this because the press statement says that the Security Council condemns in the strongest possible terms the killings confirmed by the United Nations observers. I am here also confirming on behalf of my government that there were killings of dozens of civilians, 114. And then in attacks that involved a series of government artillery and tank shellings on a residential neighborhood. Then the members of the Security Council also condemned the killing of civilians by shooting at close range and by severe physical abuse. Most of the killings that took place in al-Houla are due to this kind of assassination, killing at close range, not killed due to the artillery shellings, because artillery shellings would not leave the bodies of the victims the way you saw them. Here we are talking about the Algerian killing styles in the early 90s. My government would spare no effort whatsoever to find out the perpetrators of these massacres and to bring them to justice. I would like to add to that the Security Council should meet also to identify and call on those who are arming the terrorist groups in Syria, who are hosting them, instigating them and inciting them to violence, and protecting them, also to be brought to justice. Some members in the Council, their officials said it publicly. Some of them are permanent members. Their high-level officials said it publicly, that they would spare no effort to present and to provide the Syrian opposition with weapons, and some of them said non-lethal weapons. I don't know what does it mean. But the immediate outcome of this weaponization of the opposition resulted in the form of kidnapping the Lebanese pilgrims coming back from Iraq through Turkish territory, and in the form of suicide bombings and the infiltration by Al-Qaeda of Syrian territory. So we don't need double language in the Security Council. We need to bring everybody accountable to the justice, even though if we touch upon some permanent members. Those who have great interest in stopping violence and bringing to success the national inclusive dialogue in Syria should stop interfering in our domestic affairs, stop arming, hosting, financing, and protecting the armed terrorist groups in my country. You cannot be an arsonist and a fireman at the same time. And this is exactly, unfortunately, the case of some members in this Security Council. The Arabic, the regional, and the international dimensions of the Syrian crisis are not murky situation anymore. And everybody knows what we are talking about. I'm in your hands.
Question for you. Based on the statement you were reading back to us, in the statement it said attacks involved a series of government artillery and tank shellings in a residential neighborhood. Do you disagree with that?
I disagree with the interpretation provided. I disagree with the interpretation provided to you of this sentence by the German ambassador, the British ambassador, and others. The interpretation was wrong. The interpretation was wrong. It's up to General Mood to present the facts. It's not up to the German ambassador or the British ambassador or other ambassadors.
But is it a fact that there was government shelling on a residential neighborhood? Is that a fact, without interpretation?
General Mood did not say that.
What did he say?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
Why do you think they put it?
Because he didn't say it. I was watching him on Al Arabiya also, and he didn't say that.
What about Ban Ki-moon? What about, some are saying that this letter that's now been made public that he gave to the council is somehow more critical of the government than the briefing that was done by General Mood. Do you I mean, I guess in the sense of saying that the circumstances were unquote unclear that led up to it. What do you is there a split? Is General Mood, I guess, either more factual or nuanced than the Secretary General? What do you make of this letter?
This is exactly what I was trying to say to your colleague. General Mood said that the circumstances were unclear with regard who to blame for this attack. Yes, he did say that, but in this context, not in the context provided to you by some ambassadors. Please.
No, I just want to clarify the question. Do you feel that this letter of the Secretary General, is it more akin to the statements of the German and the UK ambassadors made out here, or to the statements made by General Mood in consultations?
More inclined to sympathize with the German and British ambassador, of course. Please.
In what way will the UNSMIS help in the investigation of these murders? In what way? Will there be a group of investigators, Syrian and international?
There is a close cooperation between the Syrian government and UNSMIS in Syria. Of course, after establishing the National Inquiry Commission, the Syrian National Inquiry Commission of Investigation, the Syrian authorities would share with General Mood the outcome of this investigation, and then of course General Mood will in his turn transmit this information or share this information with the Security Council and Mr. Kofi Annan. One important point, gentlemen, every time, you may remember that every time the Security Council has scheduled a session to discuss the Syrian crisis, something should happen in Syria, either a suicide bombing or a terrorist attack or a kind of massacre, the one unfortunately we are discussing today. So it is not a coincidence. I mean, it's not an innocent coincidence that the massacre took place only one day before the arrival of Mr. Kofi Annan to Syria. That This dimension is very important because it casts a shed of doubts about the real motivations of those who perpetrated this horrific crime. They are seeking escalation. They are seeking mobilization of the Security Council against the Syrian government. No government whatsoever would massacre its own citizens for achieving political victory over its opponents. Using artillery and shelling and tanks and missiles wouldn't kill these innocent civilians the way they were killed by. And this has been notified by the Security Council press statement when they said that they were killed at close range. That means it's a pure assassination. It's not about using artillery and tanks, shellings.
Ambassador, who do you believe is responsible for the killings? If you say it's not the Syrian government, who did it?
The armed terrorist groups have initiated this kind of terrorist attacks from the beginning of the crisis in Syria. Here we are not talking about the first incident that takes place in Syria. Of course, what happened yesterday is horrific, appalling, unjustified and unjustifiable crime. But this style of killings is not done by any government on earth. It's about armed groups. It's a terrorist crime. We cannot describe it with different terms. Whoever committed this crime will be held accountable to the Syrian justice. And the National Investigation Committee established by the government yesterday should submit its report in 3 days from now. So we will know for sure who was behind this horrific crime in a matter of 3 days.
The use of Shabiha paramilitaries, wouldn't that give a pretext or excuse for members of Security Council to blame the government that they are doing this by proxy?
As I said at the beginning, we should look at the picture in its entirety. The issue is not to go into details. Sometimes details are important, but sometimes they are not. The issue is to have the right judgment of what happened. And in order to have the right judgment, you have to look at the picture in its entirety, with its historical background, with its geopolitical dimensions. As I said, there is an Arab dimension, there is a regional dimension, and an international dimension of the Syrian crisis. And some countries are publicly saying that they would support, they have already started supporting the Syrian military wing of the opposition with weapons. So, people should be very cautious and very careful while reading the map of what's going on in Syria. Thank you.
Do you think this will lead to an increase in the size of the UNSMIS mission, maybe to arming of their personnel, or to some kind of internationalization of the inquiry?
That might be one of the targets seek by those who perpetrated the crime. That might be one reason, one very important reason for perpetrating this kind of horrific crimes, to increase the internationalization of the Syrian crisis and to increase the number of the staff of UNSMIS. Thank you.